A man who stayed silent while the world rushed to judgment has finally spoken about the death of Nolan Wells. And what he brought forward isn't just another opinion. It's a series of questions about the timeline, the evidence, and the investigation. Questions he believes can no longer be ignored. While others rushed to speak almost immediately, this man watched. He listened. He studied the case. And when he finally broke his silence, he didn't simply question what happened. He challenged the official narrative, pointed to what he believes may have been overlooked, and raised questions about whether the investigation went far enough. His name is Dr. Umar Johnson, and now, the questions he's raised could force people to look at the Nolan Wells case from an entirely different angle. If you're new here and you want true crime coverage that follows the evidence, not the noise, subscribe to Dark Pulse. Because we're not done asking questions, and neither is this case.
The Umar, happy to have you back, man. What you been up to, yo? It's been a while, yo, since I had you on the platform.
Yes, just taking care of business, fighting for the school, doing what I do, helping the parents with their children, raising a consciousness. The work never stops. The work never stops.
Yes, indeed, man. Had to bring you back on. The people, they been asking me to bring you back on for the longest, man. So it was only right to bring you back on. It's so much I want to talk to you about, though, man. It's so much to get into that I want to get your take on. Nolan Wells, how you feel about that situation?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Nolan Wells, Nolan Wells. When the case first broke, Art, I just kind of sat back because I knew the YouTubian struggle streamers were going to run with it. I knew the white liberals on YouTube were going to run with it. I knew the white racists on YouTube were going to run with it, and everybody in between. It hurts my heart for Sister Christine, Nolan's mother, to have to see so many people using her son's name and crisis and tragedy for clickbait. And that's one of the biggest reasons, Art, I kind of stood back. It almost reminded me of the Freddie Gray police unaliving in Baltimore back during the Barack Obama era. When Freddie Gray lost his life to those police in Baltimore, everybody rushed to Baltimore. They did the same thing with Michael Brown in Ferguson, not because they necessarily cared about the tragedy, but because they wanted to benefit personally from it. And so I stayed away from Ferguson. I stayed away from Baltimore. And I stayed away from the Nolan Wells situation for a while because I didn't want to look like so many other people who just jumped in to have something to say, to use that young man's loss of life for clickbait and views. Now that it's been over a month since he lost his life, I think it's okay for me to speak now because everyone else has kind of given their opinion, their analysis, their synopsis, and their feeling on the situation. So I'm going to give mine. First of all, Nolan Wells, Javon, and I want Javon to hear this, and I want any other black person who was on Devil Horns Island that day to hear this. And I want any black person who was celebrating the 4th of July to hear this. No black person, no black freedman, no black immigrant, no member of the black race at all should have been celebrating July 4th, 2026. No one should have been celebrating America's 250th solar return. And why? Because our ancestors were still enslaved on July 4th, 1776. So why are we on White Devil Horns Island anyway, celebrating George Washington and Thomas Jefferson and Alexander Hamilton and all these other white supremacists and slave masters? Why are we even celebrating them anyway? Nolan shouldn't have been out there. Javon shouldn't have been out there. No black person should have been celebrating the 4th of July, period. We would be enslaved for almost another century after America got her independence. So what are we celebrating for? To celebrate the 4th of July as an African is to celebrate the enslavement of your ancestors and the freedom of your slave masters. It makes no sense. Now, with that being said, I'm not blaming Nolan in any way, shape, form, or fashion for his loss of life. I'm just simply saying he shouldn't have been out there. Now let's take a closer look at this, Art. According to what I'm seeing, what I'm hearing, and what I've read, Nolan, Warren, Wyatt, and Trayston left for Horn Island the morning of July 4th. According to Warren's own words that he offered during an interview with Officer B.T. Coon, that's Coon as in C-U-N-E, Coon as in K-H-E-W-N, Coon as in K-U-H-N, Coon as in C-O-N-N. So Warren did a sit down with Officer B.T. Coon. And as we all know, B.T. Coon is White YouTube's pet monkey. He's White YouTube's pet monkey. So Warren sat down for an interview with White YouTube's pet monkey. And he said that they left for Horns Island the morning of July the 4th, and that it was approximately 30 of them spread across 3 boats. Approximately 30 youth spread across 3 boats. They all went to Horn Island together. They arrived at approximately 11:30. So they left around 9-ish, 8, 9-ish, whatever the case may be. They left the morning of July 4th. They arrived on White Devil's Horn Island at about 11:30. Now let's get into this. According to Warren and Nolan's other so-called white friends, they decided to leave the island around 4:30. So they were roughly on White Devil's Horn Island from 11:30 to 4:30. That is about 5 hours. Now, one question that has to be asked, Art, why did y'all leave so soon? Because they party on Horn Island all day long. Y'all didn't leave at sunset. Y'all didn't leave at sundown. Y'all left after only being there 5 hours. That's a little suspicious, Art. And I haven't heard anybody ask any of them, why did y'all decide to leave after only being there for 5 hours? Did y'all plan to only be on White Devil's Horn Island for 5 hours? Why did y'all leave at that time? But we'll deal with that later. So then let's listen to Javon, Nolan's other best friend. Now, another problem I got with this whole story, Art, is Nolan allegedly had too many best friends. I'm trying to find out, how does Nolan have so many best friends? And why did all of these so-called best friends leave their best friend on White Devil's Horn Island without his cell phone and keys? I'm trying to figure this out. So Javon claims he's Nolan's best friend. Warren claims he's Nolan's best friend. And Trayston allegedly claims that he's Warren's best friend. So did Warren have 3 best friends? Excuse me. Did Nolan have 3 best friends? Did Nolan have 13 best friends? Did Nolan have 30 best friends? Because if Javon is the best friend of Nolan, and if Warren is the best friend of Nolan, and if Trayston is the best friend of Nolan, exactly how many best friends did Nolan have? Are y'all making this up? Who did Nolan tell Warren was his best friend? Who did Nolan ever tell Trayston was his best friend? I'm not going to question Javon, because he's a brother. And I do believe that there's a strong chance that they may have been best friends. And I say that not only because Javon is a brother, Art, but I also felt that Javon, through the investigation team and alley-oop, with some of the answers that he gave on TMZ. Some of Javon's answers, in my opinion, kind of made it clear to me he actually cared about Nolan. I believe Javon actually cared about Nolan. And because of that, I'm willing to say that Javon may have actually been Nolan's best friend. I wish somebody would have asked Javon, Art, to your knowledge, has Nolan ever called Warren his best friend? Has Nolan ever called Trayston his best friend? To your knowledge, Javon, has Nolan ever told you that Warren and Trayston were best friends of his? Because Art, I'm having a problem with this three best friend narrative. Okay? I used to be 18 years old. You might have one best friend, you may have two. Don't get me wrong, if you all hang in a pack, you could have three best friends. But according to Javon's own words, Art, he didn't really hang around with them other guys too much. That's what I allegedly thought I heard him say. He didn't hang around with them guys too much. So if you got 2 or 3 or 4 best friends, you guys normally travel as a group. Javon seemed like he kind of spent most of his time with Nolan alone, just the two of them, not with Tristan and Warren. Although he knew them, it didn't appear that he hung out with them on the regular. So how could they all then be best friends? It's possible. I'm not saying it's not possible. I'm saying it's unlikely. So, according to Javon, Art, he saw Nolan at 3:40 on the island. According to Javon, what I heard him say to TMZ allegedly was that he had another friend who was involved in an altercation and that he left Nolan at about 3:40 to go check on his buddy, because according to Javon, his buddy was on another ship, and the parents of whomever on this other ship were trying to get him off the island because he was crashing out. He never said who this friend was. He never exactly told us what happened. But he said, I left at 3:40 to go check on my friend on another boat because, quote unquote, well, these are not his words, I'm paraphrasing, he was kind of wilding out, crashing out, and he needed to help calm him down. I'm paraphrasing. He said when he got back, Nolan was nowhere to be found, and I'm paraphrasing. And Nolan's boat that he came on, Warren's boat, the so-called Big Daddy, the 22-foot Triton, had already left the scene. So according to Javon, I left Nolan at 3:40 to go deal with another situation. I came back, he was gone. According to Katie, the white girl who Nolan's white best friends are trying to use as an alibi in this situation. Okay, because they claim, and Warren said the same thing to Officer B.T. Coon when he spoke with him. They claim that Nolan told them, I'm going to hang back on this island and talk to Katie. You guys go ahead and I'll get back however I get back. Again, I'm paraphrasing. But guess what? We learned through Katie's sister that Katie said she has no knowledge of Nolan ever saying that. In fact, Katie said, Art, that Nolan told her, I got to get ready to head back to the boat because my friends are leaving soon. That don't sound like somebody who plans on staying, Art. Okay? According to her sister, Katie said Nolan told Katie, it's time for me to head back to the boat because my friends are going to be leaving soon. As far as I'm concerned, Art, Javon and Katie both threw us an alley-oop. Javon and Katie are throwing Sheriff Ledbetter of Jackson County an alley-oop because neither one of them are corroborating the story of Nolan's white friends on that boat. In fact, Javon said, this ain't adding up. Javon said, it's not like Nolan to say, you guys go ahead and leave me on this island and I'm just going to stay back to talk to this girl who I barely know. According to Javon, it don't make no sense. Javon ain't stupid, Art. That's his friend. He know damn well Nolan didn't tell them that he was going to stay back on that ship. And then Katie, I'm going to give a little bit of respect to Katie on this situation. Because as a white girl, Art, for her to come out and say that is not what happened, for her to come out and say that Nolan told me I got to get back to the boat because my friends are leaving, for her to say that, Art, that took a little bit of courage and honesty. That took a little bit of integrity. Now, don't get me wrong. I don't want to give her too much credit because she is trying to clear her name. What Katie is basically doing, Art, is she's saying, listen, y'all did whatever y'all did to Nolan, but you're not going to add me to the narrative. I'm not serving as nobody's alibi. I'm not helping nobody get out of this situation. You're not going to use me as a decoy, but I still appreciate Katie speaking up for Nolan, Art, because she didn't have to do it. Although she's trying to protect herself and stay out of the investigation, I appreciate Katie for letting the world know Nolan told me I got to head back to the boat because my friends are getting ready to leave. Now, according to Katie, Art, she spoke to Nolan sometime between 3 and 4:30. Now, her window appears to be wider than everybody else's window. So Javon's window is much smaller. He said, I saw him at 3:40, went to deal with another situation. By the time I came back, they were gone. Katie said, I spoke with him between 3 and 4:30. And I allege, Art, one of the reasons that Katie is making her window so wide is she trying to leave a little bit of wiggle room for Warren and them to get their story straight, allegedly. I think Katie trying to leave a little bit of wiggle room for Warren and them to get their story straight, Art. Now, according to our sister Christine, and my heart goes out to Sister Christine, Nolan's mother. My heart deeply, deeply goes out to you, Queen. According to Christine, Art, she heard from a coach who ran into Nolan on the island as well. And according to the coach, he spoke to Nolan between 2:30 and 3:30. So Javon didn't see him after 3:40. The coach spoke to him sometime between 2:30 and 3:30. And Katie said her conversation with Nolan was between 3 and 4:30. So you know what that means, Art? We can pretty much digest, conclude that Nolan was likely to have been unalived, Art, sometime within the hour of 3:30 to 4:30. I'm going to insinuate that Nolan's life was taken because I do not believe he accidentally drowned. If he drowned, he was forcibly drowned, and we'll get to that in a minute. If Nolan drowned, he was forcibly drowned. He did not accidentally drown. He was a great swimmer. Miss me with the nonsense. That boy did not drown. If he drowned, it was by force. So again, Art, all three of these people, arguably the last three to see him alive, except for those who took his life, Katie, the coach, and Javon, are arguably the last three people to see Nolan alive, except for those who took his life on that boat, allegedly. That's my position. But here's why those three got to be spoken to, Art. Not only so we find out what they know, Art, but did they see each other during their conversation with Nolan? Because Javon, if you was talking to Nolan and left him at 3:40, and if Katie was talking to Nolan sometime between 3 and 4:30, and if the coach was talking to Nolan between 3:30 and 4:30, Art, at least two of you should have ran into each other. Did the coach see Javon? Did Javon see the coach? Did the coach see Katie? Did Katie see the coach? Did Katie see Javon? Did the coach see Katie? Art, if all three of them are saying they saw Nolan for the last time, roughly within the same hour, hour and a half, Art, did y'all run into each other? Let me tell you why I'm asking this question, Art. And I'm not throwing no shade at my brother Javon. I like Javon. I'm not throwing no shade at Miss Katie McCormick. I don't know her. I'm not throwing no shade at the coach, Art. But the reason I need to know why all y'all put y'all time within the same frame and you may have not possibly seen one another, Art, are you guys keeping yourself out of the window of witnessing this crime by saying you didn't see him after 3:30? I want you to follow what I'm saying here, Art. It's kind of interesting that they all saw him last at 3:30, not after 3:30. Javon 340, roughly 330. My point is, for all three of them to have the same exact time, if they did not see each other at all during these conversations with Nolan, are they pushing up the window of time during which they saw Nolan so they cannot be included in this investigation as a witness to a crime? In other words, Art, I don't think Javon had nothing to do with it. I know he didn't. But is he saying he saw Nolan a little earlier than he saw him so he can't be pulled into the investigation? I don't think Katie had nothing to do with the crime, but is Katie putting her conversation with Nolan a little earlier than it actually took place to make sure she can't be dragged into the investigation as a witness to a crime? Is it possible that the coach is putting his conversation with Nolan earlier than what it was, Art, to make sure he cannot get dragged into the investigation? And let me tell you why this is important, Art. Let me tell you why this is important. Under the federal hate crimes law, Matthew Shepard, James Byrd, signed by Barack Obama, 2009. Under the Federal Hate Crimes Act, Art, you can go to jail for life. You can go to jail for life under the federal hate crimes law. So if you can go to jail for life under the Federal Hate Crimes Act, Art, why is Nolan's stepfather and coach telling white folks they don't think it had anything to do with race? I still love my brother Elmore. I still love my brother Coach Tracy. But would y'all please watch what comes out of your mouth during this investigation? Because you are undermining justice for Nolan. I hope you're listening, Brother Elmore. And I hope you're listening, Coach Tracy. You are undermining justice for Nolan by saying you don't think race had anything to do with it. How in the hell do you know? How do you know if race had anything to do with it? How well do you know these young people? It was 30 of them, Art. It was damn near 30 white youth spread across 3 boats. How many of them did Elmore know? How many of them did Coach Tracy know? So how are you going to go on TV and say, I don't think it had anything to do with race? Why are you helping them avoid accountability for what they may have done? I don't know if they did it, Art. You don't know if they did it. They don't know if they did it. And they definitely don't know if it was motivated by race. What they should have said, Art, is what Javon said. And that's why I like the young brother Javon. That's why I like that young brother Javon. His mother, Sister Tashima, shout out to you. You raised a good kid. When TMZ asked Javon if he thought it had anything to do with race, Art, when TMZ asked Javon if he thought this had anything to do with race, he said, what? I don't want to answer that question. I don't want to answer that question. Perfect answer. Perfect answer. Or, Art, they could have said, I don't know. Nolan's stepfather could have said, I don't know if it had anything to do with race. Coach Tracy should have said, I don't know if it had anything to do with race. But to say you don't think it had to do with race when he was the only black boy across 3 ships, are you out of your mind? Why would you say that and help them avoid the Federal Hate Crimes Act? Javon gave a better answer than those 2 black men. Javon, a child, gave a better answer than those 2 black men, Art, when he said, I don't want to answer the question. And shout out to Javon, Art. He's intelligent. You know why? Because by saying, I don't want to answer the question, he answered the question. Of course, race has something to do with it. This is the United States of America. Race has something to do with everything involving black people. The country was built on the backs of black people. It's maintained on black people. We are disproportionately represented in the criminal justice system, overrepresented in the unemployment line, under the poverty line. Of course, everything in this country has to do with race. And I'm disappointed in us, Art, that we are so afraid to call racism what it is, that we literally got people asking us, when a white person takes the life of a black person, do you think it had anything to do with race? When a police officer takes the life or shoots a black person, do you think it had anything to do? What kind of idiotic gaslighting question is this, Art? all white people are racist. All white people are racist. So we can stop asking if it had anything to do with race. If it's black and it's white, it has something to do with race because all white people are racist. That's just how it is. Now let's get back to this. Let's get back to this. Before we deal with the infamous Cito call, Art, I got a few questions for Warren. I want to deal with that infamous Cito call, Art, and I want to deal with Sister Tashima and Sister Christine's visit to Warren's home to get Nolan's cell phone. I want to deal with them two in a minute, but before I go there, I got a couple questions for Warren and his white friends. Nolan's best friend, and Warren even called Nolan his brother, Art. He even called him his brother. He said they spent the night together before they went out to White Devil's Horn Island, Art. The night before, July 3rd, they stayed in the same home. How do you stay in the same home with somebody, Art, and leave them on an island? How do you sleep in the same house with somebody July 3rd and then leave them on an island July 4th? But I got a few questions for Warren. No disrespect. I'm not saying he's innocent. I'm not saying he's guilty, but I got a few questions for you, Warren. Since you could sit down and interview with Officer B.T. Coon, I need you to sit down and interview with Dr. Umar Ifatunde. So you can sit down and interview with Officer B.T. Coon, I want you to sit down and interview with Dr. Umar Ifatunde. Can I ask you a question, Warren? If you took his phone, how in the hell was his mother supposed to hear from her son when you have the son's phone? Did you tell Miss Christine that you had her son's phone when you called her? I bet you didn't. I bet you didn't. Think about that, Art. He called the mother and asked her if she heard from her son. But he knows she didn't hear from her son, Art, because he has her son's phone. How can the mother hear from Nolan when you have Nolan's cell phone and you left him on an island? And I bet you didn't tell her you had his phone. Because if she knew you had his phone, Art, she would not have had to use Life 360 to find the phone. If you had his phone and you called her at 11 o'clock to see if Nolan was okay, why didn't you tell Nolan's mom you had his phone? Why did my sister Christine and my sister Tashima have to use Life 360 to find their son's phone? Because you playing games. You playing games. You playing in our face like we stupid. That's what this is. I don't know if he did it, Art, but he damn sure knows who do. I allege and I believe that all 30 of those white kids on all 3 of them boats know exactly which one of them did it, and the rest of them are covering it up. And guess what, Warren? And the rest of you 30 white kids on those 3 boats? Another question I have for Warren. You said you and Nolan been friends since 8th grade. Since 8th grade, Art. But Sister Christine says she don't know none of them kids really, Art. She don't know them white kids. So help me understand how you are Nolan's best friend, friends since 8th grade. You called him your brother. Y'all spent the night together July the 3rd, the morning before y'all went to White Devil's Horn Island, and his mother don't even know who you are. And you said out your own mouth that y'all never hung out at Nolan's house. So how are y'all best friends? I had best friends growing up, Art. My mother knew who they were. Who has a best friend that they mom don't know about? Help me understand that. A best friend and the mom don't know him, it sounds suspicious. Why didn't you tell Miss Christine you had her son's cell phone when you called and asked if she heard from him? Art, as far as I'm concerned, there's probable cause he has something to do with this. Art, I'm holding her son's cell phone. I left him on the island. I took his keys and phone. And I'm on the phone with the mom. I got his phone. But I'm calling his mother at 11 o'clock. Have you heard from your son? And I'm holding her son's cell phone, and I don't even tell her. Art, this ain't making no sense. This ain't making no sense. And I want to know from Sheriff John Ledbetter, Art, Jackson County Sheriff, you don't have probable cause just off of that alone. Somebody calls somebody's mom asking if she heard from him while they have their phone and left him stranded on the island. And if you care so much about Nolan, Art, if he cares so much about Nolan, the so-called white best friend, Art, why did you wait till 11 o'clock? Y'all left the island 4:30. Y'all left the island 4:30. If you care so much about Nolan, why are you not calling his mother until 11 o'clock? It's pitch black outside at 11 o'clock, Art. It's pitch black. It's almost midnight, and you wait till 11 o'clock to call his mom and ask her if she heard from her son, but he's supposed to be your brother and best friend. Now, according to the Cajun Navy, another question for Ben Crump, Art, according to the Cajun Navy, they offered Ben Crump to put dogs on the boat and let the dogs sniff it out to see if anybody had recently been deceased on that boat or if there had been any blood on that boat. And according to the representative from the Cajun Navy, Ben Crump told him don't do it. So I need Ben Crump, respectfully, I'm not accusing him of nothing, Art, but I need Ben Crump to explain to me why you didn't let them use the dogs to sniff out that boat. Why did you not let them sniff out that boat with them dogs? Did you have your own dogs to sniff out the boat? Because if you didn't, why didn't you let them sniff the boat out with the dogs? The dogs can tell, Art, if somebody had recently lost their life or if blood had been spilled. He said Ben Crump told him no. I need Ben Crump to explain that. I need Sheriff John Ledbetter to explain why the boat wasn't treated as a crime scene, potential crime scene. I need him to explain why all them white kids wasn't arrested and questioned, because if it was black kids and a white kid went missing, Art, they would have all been arrested and questioned. You know that. They would have all been arrested and questioned. And then let's talk about the autopsy, Art. Let's talk about the autopsy. So the Mississippi State Medical Examiner, they do their autopsy July 7th, right? July 7th. And then Nolan's mother requested an independent autopsy, as she should have. They send Nolan's body to Washington, D.C. When the black medical examiner gets the Nolan's corpse, Art, the throat tissue and the lung tissue is gone. Nolan was found face down in the water, Art. Not only that, Nolan was transported face down to Washington, D.C. So guess what, Art? I have my doubts as to whether or not the red, which is probably blood in the back of the head, the subcutaneous red area, Art, I don't think that has anything to do with the blood draining to the back. You want to know why? Because he was found floating on his face, and he was sent to Washington, D.C. on his face. So the blood couldn't have went backwards, Art. I believe Nolan got hit in the back of the head, and it was that hit that cost him his life. It was that hit that cost him his life. It was that hit that cost him his life. Now, with that being said, Art, I want to go to Sister Tashima and Sister Christine going over to Warren's home, allegedly, to get Nolan's phone. So Sister Christine reported Nolan missing around 12:22 p.m. on the 4th. Sometime after that, her and Sister Tashima, Javon's mom, used Life 360, Art, and they tracked the phone to Warren's home. I believe it was Warren's home. Don't hold me to that. I believe it was, no, I think it was one over the friend's home, lady friend's home. I think Warren said they were swimming at a lady friend's home. Whoever house it was one of them kids who was out there on White Devil Horns Island. So they tracked the phone to this house, Art. And Sister Tashima said when they opened up the door, the house was dark. You know what a house was dark, Art? They turned the lights off so they wouldn't recognize nobody's face. When they saw Nolan's mom is outside, this is what I believe happened. This is what I'm going to let. Nolan's mother and Javon's mother are outside. How did they know where we are? turn the lights off because they are not going to leave until we open this door. They turned the lights off, Art, so they could hide. They didn't know that Nolan had Life 360 on that phone. They didn't know that Nolan had Life 360. Now, Sister Tashima said, Art, it took them 15 minutes to bring the phone. Art, she said it took them 15 minutes. You know why? Because they was deleting his Snapchat accounts. That's why, Art. It took them 15 minutes to bring the phone because they were deleting Nolan's Snapchat account. And they also needed to make sure they had their story straight in case Sister Christine and Sister Tashima had any more questions, Art. That's what was going on. But let me say this to Sister Christine and Sister Tashima. My beautiful African sisters, don't you ever again in your life go to a home at that time of night by yourself without no men. Brother Elmore should have been with y'all. You are in Mississippi. You don't know who would have been in that house. You don't know what type of racist rednecks could have came out there and attacked you guys, and y'all could have ended up missing just like Nolan. And once again, they would have said they never saw y'all. And once again, they would have said that they never saw y'all. So please don't do that again. I know you was looking for your son. I know you was helping your girlfriend look for her son. But don't y'all ever pull up at no white people's house you don't know after midnight. Don't you do that no more, ladies. Bring a couple alpha males with you. Bring Brother Elmore with you next time. You hear people saying things like, is he still alive? Did you unalive him? Is he okay? People are shocked, asking questions. Is he still breathing? If that tape gets corroborated, all the white young folks on those 3 boats need to go to jail, Art. They need to be charged, all of them. Whether you committed the crime, whether you was an accomplice to the crime, whether you was an accessory to the crime. Whether you committed the crime, first-degree murder, whether you was an accomplice to the crime, you helped them carry it out, whether you was an accessory to the crime, you helped them plan it, or you helped them cover it up, Art, because I'm having problems. I'm having problems with this investigation. It is too lax. It is too soft. And my question to Ben Crump and Al Sharpton, how long before y'all going to demand that the Federal Department of Justice take over the investigation, Art? As I was saying earlier, you can demand the feds to take over the investigation, Art, if there is concern about public corruption and obstruction of justice. One of the boys' mom or stepmom, and I think it's Warren, allegedly, one of the boys' mothers or stepmothers is a Chancery Court judge. Another one of the children's parents is allegedly tied to the FBI. So, Art, if their parents are tied up in the Mississippi state power structure, if these children's parents are tied up in the Mississippi state power structure, you know damn well Mississippi is not trying to find any of those kids guilty of anything. You know that. Mississippi does not have a history of helping black people find justice against white people. That is not the history of Mississippi. It ain't the history of Arkansas. It ain't the history of Texas. It ain't the history of Louisiana. It ain't the history of South Carolina, Georgia, Florida, or none of those states. It should be 4 days, Art. We should march in Senatobia, Mississippi one day for baby Cohen, who was shot and murdered by the police in the Walmart parking lot. We got to march for baby Cohen, who was shot by the police in Senatobia. We have to march in Cleveland, Mississippi for our brother Trey Reed, who was unalived September 15th, 2025, hanging from a tree on Delta State University campus in Cleveland, Mississippi, September 15th, 2025. Now, let's talk about the infamous Cito call, Art. So again, Javon sees Nolan at 3:40. The coach sees Nolan between 2:30 and 3:30. Katie sees Nolan between 3 and 4:30. I already told you I believe Nolan was unalived between 3:30 and 4:30. The fact that it took Nolan Wells' body 41 hours before we saw it, I think that body might have gotten dumped, Art. I think they might have held onto Nolan Wells' body and dumped it a day or two later.
If you're new here and you want true crime coverage that follows the evidence, not the noise, subscribe to Dark Pulse. Because we're not done asking questions, and neither is this case.